good afternoon, or good evening. Guess that depends on where you're watching this from. By the time you're watching this, it's going to be evening-esque, Eastern. But depending upon where you're on the country, it might be afternoon. So, either way, hello. Zach Chopchinsky, Bowtie author here. If you didn't know, there's Bowtie, usually a giveaway. But I'm going to let that one slide. So, here today, part of the 1,000 likes takeover. Thank you very much, Casey, for including me. So, this is the first video portion. There's going to be 2 of them. I'll try to keep dancing to a minimum. And I'll try to keep it literary-based. Sitting here with my coffee. I know some of you guys might be thinking, oh, Zach, coffee. Is that pumpkin spice? No, it's not pumpkin spice. I'm a grown man, and I do not need to drink pumpkin spice anything, all right? It's just regular coffee. It's good coffee, though. So, again, welcome back to the lair. Obviously, my office. All my lovely books behind me. Just added some new ones yesterday. I'm very excited. So, for this portion, what I wanted to do is read an excerpt from the first book in the Gabrielle series. This one is The Curious Tale of Gabrielle. Some of you may have read this book, some of you might have not. Hopefully, if you have read it, my sultry voice is entertaining enough and you'll enjoy hearing me read it to you. If you haven't read it, I'm sorry if my voice ruins it for you. I'll work on that. And no spoiler alert. Oh my gosh, I have the hiccups. The not pumpkin spice latte is giving me hiccups. Hopefully, if you have not read the book, you do find this kind of entertaining and a good, kind of a good snippet from the book. I don't believe there'll be very many spoilers in this one. I'm going to say spoiler alert in the event, but I believe you should be all set. I don't think you'll give too much away out of this one. So, we're going to start with Chapter 7. Don't worry, this is not going to be a big thing. This chapter is a solid 5 pages. But I'm going to read you this section. So, bear with me. I'll try not to stutter. Better buy the ruby red rubber baby buggy bumpers. Lo. I think we're ready. Chapter 5. If I said Chapter 7, that's because I'm a liar, or the fact that I didn't read the page. Chapter 5. Gabrielle was walking. She was walking in the dark, and it was cold and silent, except for the shuffle of her footsteps. There was a grand wooden door and a giant handle that appeared in front of her. As she was walking up to the door, it opened without her hand ever touching the handle, and she stepped through the doorway. Suddenly, it was no longer dark, but everything was lit in a familiar shade of green, and she found herself standing before a gargantuan maze made out of tall, neatly trimmed bushes. The maze reminded her of the labyrinths that you would see at a great castle. Gabrielle stood at the mouth of the maze and examining it. She couldn't help but feel a strong urge to venture in. Something told her to be afraid of what she would find. As she stood, contemplating what to do, she heard a sound, and the ground began to shake. Click. It's getting good! She found herself running, in the only direction that she could think of, into the maze. As she ran, she noticed the walls began to slowly change. Rather than ivy or bush walls, she began to see shelves. Shelves as tall as the sky. Then came cabinets and cases, then paintings, the farther she ran into the maze. Turning around every corner, she found more and more of these furnishings. Would she ever get out? The air grew colder as Gabrielle ran faster and faster, needing nothing more than to find the center of the maze. No other thoughts would be entertained by her mind, only finding the center of the maze mattered. She heard a crashing noise that brought her to a screeching halt. Looking down at her feet, Gabrielle found a broken teacup and saucer sitting directly in the middle of her path. She recognized them. As she bent to pick them up, she heard steps approaching behind her. Turning, she fell down and stared in the darkness as the steps got louder. Run. Rushing to get to her feet, Gabrielle ran faster than she ever had before. Yet despite how fast she ran, the steps grew louder and louder. She could not outrun them. She began to panic as she rounded a corner and tripped. As she stumbled to the ground, the footsteps seemed to stop. Scrambling to her feet, terrified of what was approaching, Gabrielle squinted in the green lighting. Seeming to stretch from beneath the large secretaire, was a set of feet. The feet were wearing running shoes, and the legs were wearing a black dress. Click. She looked up as the steps continued and seemingly got closer. She sprinted into the end of the row and stopped, looking from side to side, unable to decide what to do. The steps were getting closer, but she could not decide which way to run. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of silver. It was a coin, and the coin was rolling away from her down the corridor to her right. As she had no choice in the matter, Gabrielle pursued the coin down the right corridor. As she chased after the coin, the steps grew more and more distant. She was getting away. The coin rounded corners left and right. However, it couldn't shake her. As she gained a purchase on the coin, it stopped rolling, seemingly defeated. Once realizing she had won, Gabrielle was instantly upon the coin, picking it up from the earth with a victorious smile. As she brought the coin up to examine it, it turned into a folded piece of paper with her name written on it. Suddenly, she could feel her heart in her ears. Weird, right? She knew exactly what this was. In a panic, she dropped the paper as if it were infected. Staring at the paper now lying on the ground, Gabrielle took a deep breath and regained her courage and picked up the folded piece of paper and opened it, only to find it blank. What was going on? Click. The sound brought her gaze upward as she was shocked by what she saw. She was standing in the center of the maze. With this realization, the center of the maze became deathly quiet. Nothingness as far as she could see. Then, from the dark, something began to come into focus. It seemed to be stationary, yet coming toward her. Gabrielle didn't run, for it didn't seem as though it was coming after her, but rather to her. Then, as if she finally put on glasses, the unknown object from the shadows came into focus and was merely several paces in front of her. What could it be, right? As she felt a strange chill from the base of her neck all the way down to her toes. Not shoes, toes, right? She was standing and staring at a large window. The window seemed to be floating in place. Yet the window for a moment before her slowly... the window seemed to be floating in place, yet still as though it was sitting on a wall. She peered at the empty window for a moment before slowly walking closer to it. As she neared the empty window, something began to change. The closer she got to the black glass, the more she could see a face in the window. The face that she saw, however, was not a reflection of her own, but the face of a man. She felt bumps form up and down her arms as she neared the window and discovered that it was not only the face of a man, but it was the face of her father. She ran to the window and placed both of her hands on the glass. The glass was so cold that it stunned her fingertips, causing her to remove her palms in pain. As she looked to the window with tears running down her cheeks, her father smiled at her. She took a step back and looked at the window, which was floating in place, yet she could only see her father's upper body. Nothing protruded from the base of the window. Gabrielle slowly walked around the sides and found nothing. She circled the window and found no sign of her father, except as she peered through the window. She stood facing the smiling face of her father, yet she began to feel tiny droplets of rain fall on her arms. Panic ran through her body as she frequently ran to the window and stopped tried with all of her might to open it. She had to let her father in before he fell. Not again. She had to save him. Gabrielle slapped, pulled, and pounded on the glass as her father simply looked at her with the same sad smile, as if he couldn't see her panic. She stopped trying to open the glass and began to sob uncontrollably. Please, not again. Gabrielle begged as tears poured down her face while she looked at her father. As she looked at her father, the smile faded from his face, and he began to say something. She couldn't decipher what it was that he was trying to tell her. As she stood, straining to hear, her father's mannerisms became more drastic and frantic. The rain began to fall more heavily. She could only look at her father as he pleaded something silently from the window, from his home within the window. She found herself leaning, with one ear pressed against the glass, intensely trying to hear what he was yelling, but no matter how hard she tried, she could not hear a sound. "Read his lips," a voice whispered inside of her head. Gabrielle stepped backwards and squinted her eyes, doing her best that she could to read his lips and try to see what they were telling her. Suddenly, she saw his face go pale as he began to shake and wobble in place. He was falling from the ladder again. Gabrielle pounded her fists on the glass as her father once as her father once again fell and she could do nothing to save him. Slowly, her father disappeared from the window, as she fell to her knees sobbing hysterically once again. Why couldn't she save him? What was he trying to tell her? This is all my fault. With the rain falling in the back of her neck, Gabrielle sat up and wiped her eyes. What was he trying to tell her? She closed her eyes and replayed her father's face throughout her mind. In her mind, right? In her mind, she could see that he was yelling. Her father was pounding on his side of the glass and yelling something at her. It was a warning. But a warning of what? He was yelling and pointing. He was screaming at something. He was screaming behind you. Gabrielle's eyes shot open. Click. Well, I think that's enough of my voice and stumblings for the time being. Hopefully you enjoyed that little snippet. Kind of flying by the pants on this one, so we'll see what the second video brings. Hope you guys at least enjoyed this one. Zach Chopchinsky, Bowtie Author. You've got me for the remainder of my hour, and I will see you again soon. Goodbye for now.